Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our midweek service. I'm Mitchell Lavender. I'm one of the evangelists here at CrossWay Church, and I have the privilege of talking to you about Jesus tonight. Thanks for tuning in. If you have been following this class or so, it's been on the portraits of Jesus, and tonight is the last class. I know. But tonight I will be really talking about Jesus' role and how we can learn from him. And with that, I just want to share a couple of things I've been experiencing these past couple weeks. Obviously, there's a lot going on in our world. There's a lot of chaos right now. And I found myself going back and forth in between just the chaotic emotions and then peaceful emotions. And it seems like I'm kind of teetering and tottering back and forth between both of those throughout my week. I mean, think about it. From politics to systematic racism to the actual pandemic to the constant barrage of unfortunate events that's placed like right in front of our face every day on the news. The chaos inside of my own heart, my anger, apathy, lack of faith, the fear and pain and even regret and guilt for not being the man of God I want to be, and then the desire to be the man of God I want to be, and that struggle all in between. So a lot of emotions, even the mistakes I've made, the people I've hurt, just there's a lot inside and outside right now that can really feel chaotic, and I find myself going back and forth between peace and chaos. Times where I feel rested, times where I feel absolutely unrested. And on my peaceful days, even on the days that are peaceful, I find myself maybe away from some more of the more in my face chaos, but I'm still touched by this new reality of this pandemic's limitations on my day-to-day life. Even when I'm peaceful, I still have to put my mask on when I go indoors somewhere. Or unlike here, no one's here except for way back there. But man, it's even on my peaceful days, it's still different. So I don't know. I've been having a lot of different things that I've been working through and thinking through, and I'm sure you have too. And even when it comes to the future as well, man, as a minister, I don't know how I'm going to reach people on campus yet. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hug my friends again. I don't know when we'll be able to come together again as a body to be able to be together and then like lift up our voices and praise God together. That's something I really miss. There's a lot to it. I don't even know when we'll be able to, as a world, love each other enough to listen and speak the truth to each other without writing each other off. There's so many different things I've been thinking about as far as my heart and then current circumstances and even the future. And again, I find myself teeter-tottering back and forth between chaos and peace. And I found the last few weeks of my life that I started to lose my faith and my hope in the power of God and the gospel. And I could honestly sometimes feel ashamed to say that out loud just because I feel like it's not supposed to happen. But it has been happening to me a little bit where I've been doubting God or doubting the gospel or just thinking like, what is going on? And instead of trusting God, I begin to trust my own thinking. And usually what happens to me is I feel like everyone's supposed to be happy 100% of the time. So when I look at our world and then I look at my brothers and sisters, and I look at myself, I look at my family, and I see like, man, we're not happy. My conclusion is something must be wrong. And then I find myself worn out because I think I must be doing something wrong because I can't fix it. So welcome to the mind of Mitch. All right, this is what goes on in my head, and I tell you what, it's the very reason I think I've been so drained these past couple of weeks is because I bought into my reality that I've constructed instead of God's. And I'm learning as we move forward, me personally through life and through these situations, and even preaching and teaching and learning and talking with people and listening to people. I'm learning that as a person who naturally wants to make everyone happy, that's just impossible. It's impossible even to keep myself happy. Happiness in general is impossible 100% of the time. That's a relief. But I'm learning that for me, I have to figure out what's worth being criticized for, what's worth being opposed for, what's worth being ostracized for. And for sure, as a disciple of Jesus and as a minister in the church, standing firm on the truth, speaking the truth in love is one of those things that's worth being criticized for. So that's my journey a little bit. Maybe you've been feeling something similar. Maybe you're not feeling all the chaos. Maybe it's just been a little bit weird for you. Maybe you have been feeling a lot of the chaos and you're maybe on the other end of that spectrum. Wherever you are, just think about how your faith and your belief and trust in God has been this past few weeks, this past few months. like me, again, you may be just swinging back and forth day by day. I don't know. I'm here to tell you that that's okay, though. If that's been you, that's normal. You're normal. Congratulations. That's a part of life. And that's something that we can lean into. But no matter what you're feeling, I want to encourage you. Put your faith where it belongs. And your faith as a Christian belongs in Christ and in the gospel. Some of us, including myself, are putting our faith in many different things that are not the gospel. I'll be specific. You may be trying to put your faith in a movement right now. You may be trying to put your faith in the political party. You may be trying to put your faith in your own logic. You may be trying to put your faith in legislation, or even sometimes just in what people say, their opinions, what they think is going on right now. It's easy to put our faith in things that make sense to us. But that's precisely part of the problem, is sometimes our faith doesn't make sense. And faith in God rarely makes sense because we can't see everything that God can see. But depending on where you are, I want to encourage you, don't put your faith in a movement. Don't put your faith in a political party. Don't put your faith in your own logic. Don't put your faith in legislation, or don't put your faith in what people have to say. Put your faith in what God has to say and in what the gospel message has to say. Because ultimately, everything else without that ends up being nothing. But think about this. Some people right now are, trying to interpret the times and give us the commentary on why we're having a pandemic. I am not one of those people. I have no idea why this is happening, just to be frank. But I do know that God is working through it. And I'm not going to try and pretend to make sense of what the world is going through right now. All I know is it feels chaotic and it feels very unsafe, and I don't really like it. But I'm in it, and I can't turn off reality. So even though it's chaotic, I want to talk tonight about leaning into it the way that Jesus leans into the chaos in his life. So as we look at Jesus tonight, I pray, I really do, that you will find peace in him, that you'll find peace in his example, and you'll find, and when I say peace, I don't necessarily mean that everything feels great all of the time. What I really mean is a completeness, a wholeness in Christ, where fulfillment and significance is found in him, not necessarily always pleasant feelings. But as we observe him, we're going to observe him in one of the most chaotic moments in his life, and we're going to see how he operated, how he carried himself, and we're going to look at the different types of options we have as people when we're in chaotic moments. So if you look over in John 18, that's John, not 1 John, but John 18, the Gospel of John, we're going to read in a portion of Jesus' life which is known as the Passion Week. This is the week leading up to his crucifixion. We're coming in the part of the story right after he's been betrayed by Judas. He's been arrested, and he's been taken to the house of, I believe, the high priest. When we come in on this portion of Jesus' life, it's good to understand that prior to this moment, Jesus has been teaching and preaching and healing and spending time, not only with those in his region, but also with his disciples. And he's been training his disciples. He's been showing his disciples how to love, how to live, how to give. And this moment is the beginning of the climactic point of his life, where ultimately, as we talk about so much in Christianity, he is about to give his life on the cross for you and me. So this is starting, so to speak, the hill climb up to the culmination of chaos, which we'll get to as we keep talking. So in John 19, starting in verse 15, Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. "You aren't one of this man's disciples, too, are you?" she asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around the fire they had made to keep warm. Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. Going down to verse 19. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. So keep in mind, Jesus is, biblically, he's fulfilling the role as not only a prophet, but also God himself, but also as a rabbi on the ground who was respected by the Jews in Judea and throughout the region. He here is being questioned about his followers and his teachings. So to speak, he's being put on the hot seat, on the spot, in front of everybody, in front of the people who are the religious group. This would have been a very intimidating moment in anyone else's life. In verse 20, I've spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? He demanded. If I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. And as we keep reading the story, we see the continuation of his arrest and his mistreatment and then eventually his crucifixion. But I want to just pause on this moment here. Jesus is standing like smack in the middle of people who hate him. He's in the middle of chaos, so to speak. He just got slapped in the face. I don't know if you've ever been slapped in the face. I have. I've been punched in the face before. It doesn't feel good, especially when you don't expect it. And here you are amongst your brothers who are supposed to be people who respect you and regard you as a fellow teacher. And you're having an honest conversation, and all of a sudden, you get slapped in the face. Now, literally slapped in the face, which is absolutely absurd to think that some guy slapped God in the face. I don't want to be that guy. Honestly, I don't want to be that guy. But funny enough, I think sometimes we feel like life does this to us. Sometimes it feels like life slaps you in the face. And again, we've talked about this so many times, and we're probably going to keep talking about it for the rest of the year. But 2020 has been a huge slap in a lot of our faces because we just didn't expect it coming. There's been so many different layers to this year alone that have been such a slap in the face. I'm not trying to compare this directly to Jesus' situation, but for the sake of being in a chaotic year where numerous amounts of things have taken place that have been both unexpected and almost our nightmares happening back to back to back to back to back. This year can just make us feel like we're standing right in the middle of chaos and we have no idea what's going on. Now, Jesus knew what was going on. Jesus was here deliberately because Jesus knew he had a role to fill. Now, I want you to zoom out with me for just a second. Let's have a little fun. One of the things that's going on throughout the Bible that I find so fascinating is that there's character types in the Bible. And oftentimes, people flow in and out of them depending on what story you read. So we get these character types on the first few pages of the Bible. We get Adam, Eve, obviously, the tree, and then we get the snake. So Adam tends to be the character of a passive role. Eve tends to be the caricature of a person who takes something for her own benefit at the expense of whatever she's taking. The tree ends up being this thing that is deemed good, but it's often taken. And then the snake, obviously, is deceitful. So as you look at this story, you see that the chaos in this situation brings out these character types. Now, obviously, Jesus, who is like the tree in Eden, he's the one being taken advantage of in this story. He's being beaten, he's being questioned, and all at his expense for the benefit of these chief priests. They are abusing him because they have an agenda, and ultimately they kill him because they have an agenda. Jesus is like the tree in Eden, taken advantage of when he wasn't supposed to be taken. The chief priests are serving in two roles. They're acting like Eve, and they're also acting like the snake. Eve, she's taking something that doesn't belong to her. They're taking Jesus, and they're also deceiving him and manipulating him. And then you have Peter, who, as we read in verse 18, standing outside warming himself with the fire. He's just being passive. He's being passive, and then surely enough, his passivity starts to bleed into deceitfulness, which is a little scary because he starts off passive and then he becomes deceitful. She asks him, hey, aren't you one of those disciples that? He's like, no, I'm not. His passivity becomes deceit really quickly which is something to pay attention to in our own lives. So let me ask you, which role have you been playing? Or roles, and not bread rolls, all right? So stick with me here. Which roles have you been playing in your life over the last few months? Have you been passive or deceitful? Or maybe just deceitful? Or maybe just trying to take something that's not yours? Or some people, as we've observed, are using all of the chaos and things going on in the world to push their own agendas, even when that's, at the expense of other people. But chaos tends to bring out of us what's inside. And my temptation, to keep being 100% real up here, is to be passive. I tend to want to be the person who stands back and just kind of doesn't get involved. I don't necessarily want people to know I'm a minister and I'm a disciple of Jesus, especially when things are crazy, because people have expectations, and I can get afraid of people's expectations. So what about you? How often, like maybe Peter, are you just comforting yourself and being a passive disciple of Jesus? And you're just standing by the fire, everything's good, even though Jesus is being killed. Oh, I'm good, I'm warm. Or maybe, how often are you deceitful and denying being a disciple, like Peter? I'm not a Christian, or not even speaking up as a Christian, or reaching out to people for fear of what they may think of you, for fear of what they may associate you with. I get that in my head a lot. Man, I don't want to be seen like all the other Christians who fill in the blank. Or think about the other role. How often are you beating God up because you don't like what he's doing? Oh, you haven't given me what I wanted, God. You haven't answered my prayer. I don't know if I could follow you unless, or when are you going to give me this? Or when are you going to give me that? Or what are you doing? just boxing God, slapping God in the face because we don't have faith in him. Last question. How often are you just being kingdom-minded and walking like Jesus walks? Thinking like Jesus thinks? Behaving, reasoning like Jesus would behave and reason? The truth is, life is messy. All of us go in and out of these roles all the time. You might have your few that you tend to gravitate towards. For me, being passive and deceitful when I'm afraid of expectations, those are my tendencies. But what are yours? All of us are dealing with this. All of us feel a little bit of these, and that's real life. This gives us the opportunity to course correct, to really think, okay, how can I make sure I follow Jesus instead of following my own tendencies in the middle of chaos? See, Jesus leans into the chaos. He walks into it. He stands in the middle of it. He fulfills his role that God gave him in the chaos because he trusts God. Jesus has perfect faith, which I wish I had. But there's not a moment in Jesus' life where he doesn't completely trust God. Now, does he have moments of hesitation, moments of fear, moments of being overwhelmed? Absolutely. But ultimately, he continues to be dependent on God's will. He does not deceive. He does not take what he thinks can benefit him, and he does not stand passively by, ever. Jesus is our perfect example of how to imitate God. So how does Jesus lean into the chaos? How does he do this? Well, if you observe him in chapter 18 here in John, he, first of all, is being led according to what he knows God wants him to be led into. So his role is quite different from ours. We are not Jesus, in case you were wondering. I'm definitely not. Maybe Chris, but I'm not. I'm kidding. But we're not Jesus, right? So we're disciples of Jesus. We're followers, but we are not him. So our role is not exactly the same. We're not the Messiah. We were not born to give our life for mankind. We were born to imitate him and represent humanity the way God created it, for sure. But we're not Jesus. So how does Jesus handle, lean into, embrace the chaos with his God-given role? He trusts God. He trusts God, despite what's going on around him, despite being slapped in the face, despite being questioned and ridiculed, despite being misunderstood and criticized. he never steps outside of his role because he trusts the one who gave him his role. For us, if you say you're a disciple of Jesus, again, I'm not saying that you got to get it right 100% of the time. We're going to try, though. We're going to try to give it our all, but we're going to fall flat on our face sometimes. It's okay. Get back up. Keep going. But as our role as disciples, what is our role? Why are we here? Two things. We're here to love God with everything we have, and we're here to love our neighbor as ourselves. You know what that looks like in your life. I know what it looks like in mine. In other words, we're here to worship God, to bring glory and honor and dignity to his name, and we're here to teach people how to become followers of Jesus. That's our role. That doesn't change just because the world is feeling like it's chaotic right now. Our role is to stand and imitate God, even when times are chaotic. And if you think about it, right now is even so much more of an opportunity to represent God. But oftentimes we find ourselves right in the middle of the chaos and we just forget who we are. We act like, for me, I can act like Peter and just be like, I don't know him. I'm just doing my thing. Or sometimes, again, we fill those roles, playing the deceitful one or the passive one or the one who tries to take advantage of the situation. Again, be aware of your tendency, but remember who you are. Go back to who you are. So think about the chaos that you probably have experienced from, I've talked to people on the phone this week about losing loved ones and not being able to visit them in the hospital. I've talked to people about the pain they're going through, just from different physical ailments or emotional pain, the suffering and uncertainty of futures or not knowing what they're going to do, fear about what's going to happen to us with everything going on in the world. Just the shock of being exposed to how messy everything is and not being able to fix anything. Even though people seem to want us to fix things now, we can't fix anything right now. Life is too complex to give a solution outside of what God has given us, which is the gospel. That's the true solution. But sometimes we forget that. We may think about having difficulties with our children when we're raising them, or just running out of energy as a person, as a parent. Obviously, you love your kids, but that doesn't mean that parenting is easy, right? Difficulties with your spouse at home. Maybe it's mental issues or sexual issues. Maybe it's addictions or unhealthy tendencies. Maybe being ridiculed or judged or self-judgment. Self-deprecation. Just, there's so much stuff, internal and external, that if we just get stuck in all of the chaos and we forget who we are, guess what? The chaos wins. We become a part of the chaos, and we forget to represent God and help the world. But this is all real life. This is real life. Jesus was in the middle of these men, and they beat him. They ridiculed him, and eventually they crucified him. But he stood there like a champ, because he is a champ. But he didn't run away from real life. Jesus meets God in real life. God meets Jesus in the real life, in these moments of life that are chaotic. In the middle of dying, he found rest in God. The chief priests didn't pull their punches. The walk towards the cross for Jesus wasn't shorter than it was for anybody else. The pain didn't stop once he was crucified. His breaths didn't get easier to take. His dehydration didn't fade away. And his body did not stop feeling the nails in his nerves while he hung. But his mind and his heart were able to experience God. I'm absolutely moved by him and his example and who he is and the role he kept playing and being because God called him to be that. I want to turn over to Psalm 46 and read this psalm because I think it's extremely relevant to what we're going through right now. I think it'll help us out a lot as we think about our role as disciples trying to follow Jesus. So Psalm 46, beautiful psalm. It's kind of a macro view of the world. It's looking at nations. It's looking at people. It's looking at chaos. Psalm 46 is all about the world waging war the way the world does, and God intervening and showing us who he really is. So Psalm 46 says this: God is our refuge and strength. And refuge is such a beautiful word, because refuge means it's the place you run to when it's raining outside, to get out of the rain. It's the place you go to when you're in danger, and you're just like, I need to be safe. That's your refuge. God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. Chaos, saying that we're not going to fear, even though we are witnessing and standing in the middle of chaos. Verse 4, there's a river which streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, and the earth melts. It's powerful. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Again, a place you run to find rest and protection and peace. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. What desolations? He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire, or the chariots with fire. So God breaks our weapons of war. Be still and know that I'm God. I will be exalted among the nations, and I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. So he says, in the middle of chaos, stop fighting and experience his power. You know, all of the chaos can seem absolutely overwhelming, but you know what? It's prime time for God. When things seem absolutely overwhelmingly stressful and we can't get our minds and our arms wrapped around everything and we don't know what to do and we throw our hands up, finally, we give space for God to show us who he is. You know, he's such a great warrior that he puts an end to all war. Think about that for a second. Once he gets out there, there's no more war left, right? But again, just this macro view of humanity and our world. This is not the first time in human history where things have felt chaotic. God's not surprised, and he's not unaware, and he is not weak and unable to show us who he is. So I believe that when Jesus is standing in the middle of those men, when Jesus is getting ready to be crucified, when Jesus is being beaten, ridiculed, spit on, mistreated, when he's dying, I think Jesus knows who God is, obviously, but he trusts him. Jesus is able to stand still. He's able to not fight the way the world fights. He's able to take up the posture of someone who's dedicated and loyal to God himself. And as disciples, that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that we don't fight the way the world fights, that we don't pick up the weapons of war that the world is picking up, that we don't buy into the same type of chaos that the world is spewing at us, but that we sit still. That doesn't mean you're passive, but that we choose to trust God and work the way God works. In the midst of all the chaos, we can take up the same posture that Jesus takes up. We can fulfill the role as disciples of Jesus Christ. Being still doesn't mean that you're passive like Adam. It doesn't mean that you're deceitful. It doesn't mean that you're ignorant and that you don't pay attention. It just means that you stand with God and you imitate God and you trust God. So in the midst of all that's going on, internally for me, externally, internally for you, externally, what if we are just a people who simply trust God's word and God's way? We'll be criticized, but that's worth being criticized for, without a question. People want to talk bad about me because I love God. Don't talk bad about me because I did evil. That should never happen to a disciple. We're kingdom-minded people. We should represent God in everything that we do. What if instead of losing our faith, being passive, deceitful, or manipulative, we just imitate Jesus? We fulfill our role as disciples. We keep loving our neighbor as ourselves, and we keep loving God. What if we stop holding back the truth from our neighbors, that the gospel message has the power to save them? What if we stop deceiving our friends and being honest about what we really think about what's going on. What if we stop taking advantage of Jesus for his blessings, but denying our allegiance to him because we don't want the chaos or the ridicule? What if we just started being who he designed us to be? What would the world see in the midst of chaos? I think the world would see a very bright light that either makes them run away or comes and takes refuge in Jesus. Thank you for your attention. Hope this is encouraging. It is for me. And stay faithful. Be still. Know that he's got. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Great to be together. And sorry, I'm having a little technical microphone problem here. All right, great to see everybody in this room, which is 2 people, so that's why we're not wearing a mask there a long ways away from us. Actually, there's 3 total, 2 of them behind the booth and 1 of them with a mask on about 100 feet away from us. So I think we're safe in here. But I do want to say, while I'm talking about that, I do really want to reiterate how critical it is that you do follow the rules that the city has given us. The direction of the mask is really a wise thing to do. Please do not wear your, I see a lot of people doing this, they wear their mask as a chin strap. That really doesn't really help at all. It doesn't help if you just cover your mouth or you just cover your nose. You got to cover that whole area. And please encourage each one of you to do that. We're having a significant increase, and a lot of it is because some people don't think they have to do that. So please be serious, wear the mask, and be wise. You do that out of love for other people, because when you wear the mask, you decrease the chance of them getting it. You a little bit, but especially them getting it. So please be wise. There's too much of it going around right now, and it's overwhelming some medical systems across the country right now, so please be wise. Second thing is we have several new prayer requests that I want to make sure that we go over. First of all, Carla's mom had surgery yesterday for lung problems. She just found to have cancer. They think they had got it all, but anyway, she needs our prayers for post-surgery and for the cancer to be completely eradicated and for them to feel God's comfort and peace. So please be praying for them. Also, Nate, Carla, and Audrey are all sick right now. And they have been getting tested for the virus, so please be praying for them as well. David Schubert is also sick right now. Please be praying for him. And Laverne Cochran asked me if the church could pray for her. She's struggling with some physical issues, some spiritual issues, and she really wants to feel closer to God. She's just having a hard time. Please be praying for her. That's Alan's mom, and she really wants to be at peace with God and wants to feel close to him. A couple things. We have a birthday bonanza right now. This is the weirdest couple of days of the year. So I'm going to tell you, we have Josh Clement on Sunday, and I'm probably going to miss someone. I'm sorry, guys. I am not the birthday master, but these are the ones I know about. Marie Watson on Monday. Peggy Johnson, Tuesday. Peggy Winship, Tuesday. Sean Winship, Tuesday. Casey Burke, Tuesday. Jenny Kimber, Wednesday. Allie, standing here next to me, made in 60. 60. Amazing, right? She is a beautiful woman. I am so thankful for her. And then Peter O'Donnell also has a special birthday today. So we have a multitude of those. So we're going to sing to them, all right? Alison didn't know I was going to do that.
No, don't do that.
But I'll just sing, and you don't have to sing to me.
No.
So we're going to go, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Josh, Marie, Peggy, Sean, Jenny, Allie, Peter, and Casey. Happy birthday to you. All right, so yay, it's good. Yeah, Allison hates to have to stand up even when she's in the congregation and once a minute, but anyway, I just am so thankful for her. God has blessed me in amazing ways through her. She does so much for me, for our family, for the church. She is a blessing from the Lord, so love you.
I love you too.
All right, so now back to the marriage class. Although that's really part of the marriage class, it's just loving each other, right? And this is our last class. We're going to give one more topic that's not going to take the whole class, and then we're going to give just a summary of some thoughts that I think are really critical just to go over and make sure that these are the things that you're doing in your marriage. So what we're going to do is talk about what we classically call, when we are dealing with pre-marriage counseling, we call it the in-law versus the outlaw situation, all right? And this is the stress that comes in from family issues, but just dealing with it, we'll talk specifically about the in-laws, parents-wise, but when you get married, you marry the whole family. And most families, if you're familiar with the movie, have a cousin Eddie or two in those families. So there's always a little bit of stress associated with family issues in life. And so I want to start with, what does the Scripture teach? And again, I think that it's really important for just an understanding in the Bible. When you have something that's in the Old Testament, and it's said in the New Testament, in context of trying to apply the same concept about anything, it's not a cultural issue. This is not something that just happened in this one culture. This is an issue that that is a principle that we must abide by. And it's mentioned at least 3 times in the Bible that I just wrote down: Ephesians 5:31, Genesis 2:24, and Matthew 19:5. And this is commonly a part of a wedding ceremony. And it says this: "For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and the two will become one flesh." Now, this is quoted by Jesus in Matthew 19. It's in Genesis, given by God. And then here Paul repeats it again. The point about this is it's really, really an important thing in marriage. And that is, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. And King James has a nice way of saying it. It says you leave your father and mother and you cleave to your wife. So it's leave and cleave. Those really aren't words that we use so much, but I always thought it was kind of a neat phrase. I want to start this discussion on this with a principle or two that I think are critical. Number one, number one thing actually in a marriage for each other is to both people to love God. That was the first class we started with. I think it's wrong if I don't bring it up again. It's critical if you want to have a great marriage, if you want to grow closer to each other, more selfless, then you need to make sure that you pursue God. The best gift I can give to Allison is to pursue God. The best gift she can give me is to pursue God. By the way, if you have questions or comments about anything you want to send him, and Allie is going to take those for us for you as we're going through this. So please feel free to do that. I forgot to mention that earlier. But it's your responsibility, husband and or wife, I'm talking to both of you, to get each other to heaven, to protect each other spiritually. This is your job. It's the number one most important thing that you have to do. When you made that commitment to that person, that you said you love them more than you loved yourself, the reality is what you told them is, I want you to get to heaven no matter what it takes, and I'm going to do my very best to do that. Not only do you get the benefit of going to heaven, but while you are on earth, those principles will help you to grow more in love with each other, closer to each other, have more fun, and enjoy life way, way more than if you don't. So don't skip number one. Okay? The number two thing is that we are supposed to be one. And that doesn't really, it's not totally separate from that, but I really wanted to emphasize this. You become a team. And that concept, when it says you become one that we just read about, you become one flesh, it's not just talking about sexuality, although it's important. We talked about that last time. But the point about that is I like what 1 Corinthians 1:10 says about the church. And so if this is supposed to apply to the church, it definitely should apply to us as individuals. It says that you should be perfectly united in mind and thought. And that doesn't mean you never have a disagreement, but that you come together as one, you stand as one, you have as it says in another one in Philippians chapter 2, it says to be like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. And I think it's really important for you to be united with your spouse in your mindset and your purpose. And where you're not, guys, this is something you have to correct, because Satan will come in there and make that a bigger wedge if you don't deal with it. So I encourage you really to have this, first of all, your love for God like never before, and number two, to become the team that God intended you. He really does want you to function as one. One mindset, one heartbeat, one idea and purpose. And when you have that conflict, when it's not, because sometimes you're going to have that conflict, you come together, you work it out, you find out what your spouse feels, you come with what you feel, and together you come up with a solution. And we talked about this in communication, but it's critical. And so that leads us into the marriage, to the relationship with in-laws. Now, it is critical that the most important person in your life is your spouse. This is a shift, because before that, your family was typically the number one thing outside of God. And so now it's a change. And it sometimes people have a hard time navigating it. Both the people that are getting married and the parents. And some people don't know how to do that leave part. It's really hard sometimes to leave that. And we're going to spend some time talking about this. It's not loving your parents less. It's basically a shift in priority. But you love your spouse more. So you love your parents with all your heart. You're supposed to. But all of a sudden, your spouse takes that number one role in your decision making. That's what the scriptures teach. That's what Paul says. That's what Jesus says. That's what God says. I don't think we should argue with that. So this is a change and a transition that can be really hard, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. Because sometimes the people getting married, the young couple will say, one of them doesn't really want to let go of that bond with the parents. And sometimes the parents won't let go of that bond with the kids. Now, it's not letting go of the bond, it's basically a control issue with that. And there's a lot of different ways that this can work. And first of all, I want to say this. We have been incredibly blessed with parents that really have been incredible in-laws to each other. I think we both feel like we've been just incorporated into one big, larger family. I love Allison's parents. She loves my parents. And we really are thankful for them. There's been times when, and not for a really, really long time, in some of those relationships where there was challenges, but what we learned to do is really important. And I want to tell you, this is critical for you to be able to do. And that is, what you do is, if there's an issue where you think it is, let's say that this did not happen, but let's say my dad was saying, you have to do it this way, and he was giving me this pressure. This did not happen. Don't take this wrong. But if he did, or if he was saying something bad about Allison, what do I do? What you do is you talk to the person who's saying that. That's my job, because I'm supposed to protect my wife. Now, if he's giving me advice about something we're not doing, I need to take that and listen to it. But when it comes to control over that relationship, I left that control when I married Allison. I do want the advice, and you guys, you need the advice of your parents. But sometimes some parents are very overbearing and dominating in that situation. And what you do is, you have to be together. First of all, I cannot allow them to separate us, which hasn't been an issue for us. But I'm just saying it is, and I know marriages that it is that way. So you can't do that. A key thing is, you've got to be willing to confront it, and you have to confront it together. Not in anger, just say, listen, we're married, we're going to be together, and we're going to work as a team, and this is not the way it's going to be. This is what we're going to do. We want your input. But you have to be able to say that directly, because if you don't say that directly, what's going to happen is it's going to divide you two, and it's not okay. And so there's a shift in a way that you deal with things. You must stand together. Allie, anything you want to say about that?
I think, especially as a mother-in-law now, moms really do that whole nagging thing. We like to do that. And I've really tried to back off and let my kids be adults. And if they ask for advice, I give it to them. Sometimes I give them advice, but then if they don't take it, I try not to be offended. I just try to let them make decisions, because I want them to live their lives in a godly way. And I want to be that mother-in-law that's not dividing my kids or trying to control things, because I really can't even control my own life. So, why should I try to control anybody else's? But that's just really important, I think, as a mother-in-law or as parents of grown children, that we've tried to do. And our parents have been really good about that, too.
It is really important, though, is making sure that if that does come up, if you feel that tension, if you feel like one of your parents is putting significant pressure on you, what you do is you talk to them. You stop and just say, look, we really are together on this, and this is not okay. And you just make it really direct and talk to people in love, and it's very, very, very important.
Okay.
Go ahead.
With this question?
Yes.
What is some advice for parents that may be having a hard time letting go of their kids? What can the kids do to lovingly help with that without being too close or too distant? Good question.
Okay, it's a great question. And my opinion is the key on that is you both have to come together to do that. So what you do is, let's go back to, let's say it was Allison's mom this time, all right? And she was giving us this pressure that's too much. If I just confront it on my own without her together, that won't work really well, because it's her mom.
My mom will resent him.
Yes. So what we do is we come together and we sit down and we talk about it directly. Or we say this is, listen, Chris and I are totally together on this, and we're going to stand together on this, and you have to let them know that when too much is too much. Because if you don't do that, they don't necessarily know. A lot of times people don't even know they're doing it. They just are grown up being kind of a controlling parent or controlling person. And you keep doing that, and you can feel pressured all the time. And I think it's really important that you make it a direct conversation and tell them, this is how we feel. I don't have any less love for you than before, but we have to work together on this, and we don't feel. Don't say my husband doesn't feel this way or my wife doesn't feel this way. Right. It's we. So you don't have that thing in where, well, I really don't want to do it, but my husband does, so we're not going to do it. You don't do that. You're together. So it's really important to do that. Anything?
I think that's good. And realizing, like, I mean, things that come up, I think a lot of times are things like, where are we going to spend Christmas? Where are we going to spend the holidays? And parents can get really jealous of each other. And so, like, have a plan going into it. We really, when we do pre-marriage counseling, we really try to tell people, okay, let people know ahead of time. This year we're going to spend Christmas with you, and this year next year we'll do, switch.
Right.
But like, set it up ahead of time and let them know so that they're not trying to pressure you.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And some of you come from situations where your parents are divorced, and what happens is there's this pressure, as not just, it's pressure inside them, like Allison's parents were divorced for a time, and we would go to Alabama and to visit them, and it's like everyone would have their plans that they wanted us to do. And so some of it was impossible because we're supposed to be in two places at once. So we actually learned that if we go ahead and say, listen, we're going to be here on those 2 days and there on these 2 days or whatever it was. And then it worked out fine and everybody was happy. But instead of having to play against each other. And so it's really critical that if you talk about it ahead of time, you come to this decision and you go ahead and say it because it makes things way, way smoother about that.
I think, too, you guys have to both feel settled in your minds, too, because if we always spend Christmas with Chris's family and we never get to spend it with mine, I can get resentful of that. So making sure that you talk it out and you both have a really good compromise on that
Right.
you both feel good about.
And don't make commitments about things that you know are like that until you talk to your spouse. Because you both may be telling your parents the same, you're going to be at the same place at the same time, and so that creates a real problem. So talk about it ahead of time, think about it, and it's really important. Second, another piece about this is don't ever talk bad about your spouse to your parents. It could be really easy to do that. You can say something negative about your spouse, you're upset with her or him, you say that to your parents, and you guys work it out. But then they're like, is there still problems? Is there something going on? And it also undermines your husband or wife. They know you, they're going to love you probably no matter what you do. But they don't know your spouse as well. So if you're not really careful, you can undermine your relationship, your spouse, and the way your parents think about your spouse. So don't do that to people. Anything?
My parents always liked Chris more than me anyway, so it wasn't a problem.
No, we were really fortunate. We have amazing love for our family, so it's been really good. So when you do get married and you, the parents thing is really, really important. Again, be wise about it, talk directly, love them. But remember, what's your goal for your parents? Your number one goal for your parents, whether it's in-laws or your parents, the number one for all of those people is that they go to heaven. So you got to remember that everything that you do should have that in mind. That's the number one goal. And if you have any other goal, you really have the wrong goal for them. So make sure that you treat them with love, you treat them with respect, you treat them with honor, and you still are open to advice. However, there comes a time when you have to say, this is our decision. But please really think about them from the spiritual perspective all the time and set up a relationship where you can share spiritual things. Your parents have insight that you don't have. They've been doing things longer than you have. And so especially if they're spiritually oriented, you guys can really have an amazing bond where you can help each other to grow. Our children are willing to give us advice, give us sometimes challenges and different things in our life. Mm-hmm. They see things about us, and they're old enough where they feel confident they can do that. And you really want to facilitate that as parents and as children. Please really be aware of that critical goal. That is your goal. Even if sometimes parents are really challenging, you still want to help them get to heaven no matter what. That's the number one goal. Always treat them, when you go to their homes, you treat them with love. You try to be a servant. Don't fall into old patterns of growing up and not being helping other people. All right, so marrying families. So again, when you marry them, your spouse, you marry brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, all this whole family, and every family has some people that are challenging. So what do you do with them? What's the number one goal for them? You want them to go to heaven. And you really work hard to get them to heaven. That's your goal. That's how you spend time with them. You really set it up for them. When you go to visit, that if it's on a Sunday, at a time when you can go to church, you go. You want them to see this really, really important. There's times when you may miss, but one of the things that we really try to do is when we go places, we try to make sure that we go to church We encourage them to go with us. We try to find the best church we can, which we feel like would be beneficial for them, and then we try to go. But really, whatever relative that you're with. Sometimes in today's world, you know, there's a lot of hostility, there's a lot of hatred going on, and there's a lot of hostility towards Christianity right now. And you can't, one thing I want you have to be wise about, again, you want everyone to become Christians, but sometimes it gets so hostile that it's sometimes not the best thing to spend a lot of time. You pray for that person, you be kind to them, but if they're continually undermining things and trying to create problems, which some people will do, be really, really careful, be straightforward, tell them you love them, but when they're going to act in a certain way that it's not best for your relationship, and that's okay to say with love and respect, and always treat them with love. But sometimes, again, the speaking the truth, love skill is critical if you want to have great relationships with your family. And so you've got to tell them, hey, listen, we don't agree with this. This is not something we do. We still love you. But if you don't say those kind of things, what happens is it's just going to be antagonistic for a really long time. So be direct, be honest, and speak in love. And really, the holiday thing we wanted to talk a little bit about with that too. We just mentioned that. So really, another thing about holidays that really is important, sometimes people, you can offend each other because you grew up doing certain things on Christmas or Easter or whatever it might be, and then you say, well, this is just the way we're going to do it. Make this as a time where your communication skills that we talked about earlier, where you find out what was really special to you about growing up, what was a special thing about, you know, yourself, and then you just put them together, and you can really make some neat traditions and neat things. So it's funny, though, when you try to change those things with your children. We tried to change them a little bit after the children were growing up. That didn't go well. They didn't like that at all. I said, this is the way we're supposed to do it. We actually sit in the same places on Christmas. We're very traditional about those things. So, and as the children marry, then we have fun spots for their spouses, and they sit in the right place, and the grandchildren will probably have to sit in the right place. So it's going to be interesting in the future.
One thing we have done, though, especially as our family's grown, now we have 3 sets of in-laws with Nick and Rebecca and Caitlin, is it's important for them to be able to spend time with their families on like Christmas. So we'll celebrate Christmas on December 20th or December 28th. We just work it out because we want to make sure that it isn't the day itself, it's being together. So just try to really be flexible about that stuff.
Yeah, really, it's the love that you share. Really, Jesus wasn't born on the 25th anyway, so it's okay, you know. So, but enjoy that time with your family. So here are some foundational issues we want to go over, okay? And as we talk about these, we're going to go back, and these are a little bit repetitive from some of the things we talked about, but they're really worth listening to. Number 1, above all else, pursue God. If you want the great marriage that you said when you got married, and the whole thought of having, man, I want to grow old loving my spouse, enjoying my life with him or her. Pursue God and grow in your love. Don't let anything get in the way of that. That's just a foundational principle. Probably the number 1 thing about everything in your life. If you do that, it'll make the biggest impact. Number 2, and jump in if you see anything. Okay. Don't get self-absorbed in your life or in your marriage. Selfishness will destroy everything that you're trying to build. Healthy marriages are ones that reach out to other people. And this is one of the things that I even tell people when they're dating. And that is if you're just dating and focused just on you, it's usually unhealthy. If you're dating, and especially as a spiritual couple, and you're dating and you're trying to reach out to other people, or you're trying to make a difference in other lives, it shows a lot more maturity and a lot, it's much healthier. Think about churches even. When a church is only just focused in on itself, it tends to devour itself. But if a church is reaching out and making an impact, sharing their faith with other people, the church grows and is vibrant. I've seen it every time that I've been in churches that are like that. So make sure that you, as a married couple, don't allow yourself to become so internally focused. And this is one of the problems of the virus right now. I'm seeing more and more people, more and more marriages becoming more self-oriented. And there's people around us that have incredible needs. It's imperative that each one of us as couples and each one of us as families, we really make sure that we are still reaching out around us. Do not get just focused in on you. If you do, it's going to really hurt you in the long run. Find a couple that can encourage you, to strengthen you. You should look for that. Honestly, when you're dating, you're getting serious about marriage, you should have a couple in your life that you can talk to, that you can share what's going on, that you can get advice from.
that will tell you the truth about what they see in you. That's really important.
Absolutely. You really want to make sure that they will do that. Facilitate and ask them, say, what can I do that's different as a husband or a wife? And then you also want to find somebody else where you're helping them. If you can have that going on in your marriage, you're going to find that your marriage is much more vibrant, way more fun. So I urge you, don't get self-absorbed. Be a giver in your marriage. The third one here that we have is create a great atmosphere in your home. You want your home to be a place where you long to be. If all the places you could go to, you want your home to be the best place. You want your children growing up and thinking, this is the greatest place that could possibly be. They want to bring their friends over here. You want to have a home where it's like warmth. They walk in there and you can tell there's love in that culture. This is done by respecting each other. Don't talk down to each other. Being selfless, as we mentioned, being a great listener, and looking for ways to give to each other. Just make it a way. Make your spouse feel special every day, not just on birthdays. Although we had a great day today, but make it a place where I should make a place where Allison knows that she's special to me every day, no matter what goes on. Create that culture. Make it a place where your kids know that they're special every day. Find ways to be kind. The random acts of kindness should begin in your home. Just do something nice just because you love them. Train your heart to do that. Train the culture in your home to do that. You think?
That's good. Keep going.
All right.
He really does do a good job with that.
All right.
So
Don't
stuff.
accept mediocrity. Guys, here's what happens is you get used to certain things and you stop trying to grow. Our theme for this year, and I know it's been so many different things going on, but really is every day. Make a step closer to Christ every day. And if you're married, you should have the same mindset with your spouse. You should have plans. I'm going to every day do something special. I'm every day going to grow in my marriage. I'm every day going to do something kind. Pick out some things. Create a culture in your home where you don't stay the same. Mm-hmm. Because then you get used to each other, you get used to being with that person, and what happens is you start to drift away a little bit, and you take each other for granted. Make it so it's so special that your spouse wants to be with you. They're not looking for, oh man, I got to go get away from this. The home should be a place of incredible joy, and it only happens if both people are willing to create this atmosphere and this desire to grow. And if you don't have that, talk to each other, get some help. You probably don't have anyone in your life either helping you with your marriage. But it can be great. It's intended to be great, and it really can be. So let's say you feel like, man, there's some things that need to change in my marriage. And the first thing we typically do, this is number 5, is we look and say, man, if Allison would just do this, then the marriage would be good. And it might be better. But where do I start to change? Change will start with you. If you are not the one that's starting to change, then really you're not doing your job in your marriage. Again, if you want to grow, you talk about what things need to change, but you be the one to initiate change. You may have only 10% of the problem, which is probably not true. But whatever problem you see there, make sure that you are the one that is initiating the change. You're trying to change you, not the other person. When you're talking with the other person, don't be thinking, if she would just do that, if he would just do that, then it would be happy. That might be happier, but unless you change you, it's not going to change in the way you want it to. Change begins with you. It's like the sermon we talked about Sunday. All right, a couple more things. Communicate effectively, honestly, with love. The speak the truth in love thing that I've mentioned over and over again is essential if you want to have a great marriage. It begins with each other. It begins with it goes on with your children. It's critical for the life that you have with your parents, for your in-laws. You have to treat them with respect, with kindness, but you have to speak the truth in love. And many people don't know how to do this. This isn't taught in churches typically very much. We read over it, but this is the discipleship concept. When you want to get better, you want to grow, you want to help each other, you speak the truth in love. That's what coaches do, although it's not always in love. But you want an atmosphere in your home where it is always in love. And you should expect the same from your spouse. And you should want that. This should be something that you think honest, straightforward, kind communication is a blessing. Make sure you learn to listen and not find out what's wrong with the person saying. These are critical steps, and communication can change the whole culture in your home and in your life. seventh thing, and this is our last one that we got right now, and if there's questions, we'll talk about those, so please write those in right now if you do. But the seventh thing is to learn to be the master of your time. Right now, there's so many things that control the time of your life, and most of those are related to technology. Yes, we have jobs and we have things like that, but we have to do that to eat and to have a place to live. But with your free time, with your time where you can select what you want to do, most of us, according to every study that we read now, is losing time, great amount of time, to technology. Whether it's your cell phone, whether it's the TV, whether it's video games, it's a powerful, powerful, very harmful influence, as we talked about this past Sunday, in our lives. But it's really powerfully negative on our marriage. Because you only get so much time. When you have children, when you have work, when you have chores to do, and you put all those things together, and then you add in 3 hours of cell phone time a day, you're done. You know, you really don't have that ability to share life with each other. How do you learn to communicate if you're just playing, if you're texting? How do you learn to communicate and speak the truth in love? It's just not going to come from technology. It doesn't happen. It's not taught. It's a lot of times speak the falsehood and hatred, unfortunately. But really, in your marriage, don't let the little technology things come in and destroy you, because they will. I think it's probably one of the most harmful things to marriages in America right now that there is, and I think they can really be helpful tools. I use mine every day. I study the Bible with my prayer list, and there's a lot of good things you can do with it. But when you just are sitting there toying with your phones instead of talking to each other, and instead of going for a walk, instead of spending time just talking about what's in your heart and what your goals are and how was your day, getting to know what's going on in each other's life, with your children too, there's nothing on the cell phone that's more important than that. There is nothing. So I really urge you to be control of that time factor. Hallie? You have something?
Lindsay just wrote, this was really a good point, I think, just going back to dating, looking for spouses, it's important to look for a person that gets along well with your family. Something that, especially with women, we have the power to pull men away from their families. We can be very divisive. Those who are dating should really look for those signs. Just, thoughts. But that's really a good point. You are marrying that family.
Right.
You're going to be spending holidays with them, and you need to pray to love them, or if you don't already love them like they are. But.
Absolutely. And actually, you learn a lot about your potential spouse and the way they treat people. Because if you can't treat the people that are the parents of your wife or husband in a good way, that's a bad sign. It shows that you're, especially at that point in time, because it doesn't typically get better afterwards unless, if it's antagonistic in the beginning, but you can really create that atmosphere where you care about him, you initiate with him, you love him. A great thing to do is I've done this with Allison's parents many times, is just thank them for doing a great job raising such an amazing person. And so I think just letting them know that you appreciate what they've done and build them up for things in their life. Because, guys, you obviously think that person that you're going to marry is pretty special. So please, really, treat their parents and their family with respect. Become friends with them. And really, I agree with Lindsay, is if they're not willing to do that, I would be really, really cautious about pushing the relationship too far.
Yeah. One other thing I thought, just going back to the in-laws, is as grandparents, or as kids who have parents that are grandparents, to really really talk a lot about how you want your parents to treat your kids. If you want them to discipline them, one of my grandchildren last week said something about, let's keep this a secret from mommy and daddy. I'm like, no, we don't do that. But just really, really be respectful as grandparents of your son or daughter, in-laws, both of them, their wishes and their desires. Don't go behind their backs with their kids.
Very much so. And again, guys, this is talking to our age group especially, is if your children ask you to do this with your grandchildren, respect that. Again, that's one of those things that make great in-law relationships, great parental relationships, and they will respect you more. And if you work together as a team, really as grandparents, my goal for my 4 grandchildren right now is that they go to heaven. And I will give advice to my children about different things to help them to do that, and they have to choose whether to do those things or not. But I want to help them to do it however I can. And so really, don't lose track of what the most important thing in life is that we all make it to heaven, and you help each other to get each other there. Whether you're grandparents, my children, when my grandchildren get old enough, if they have advice to me, I want it. We need to be able to have that talk and that mindset and that heart. Guys, we do love you all. We know that we covered a lot of different things in the end, but we wanted to review this for you because we really believe that it makes a difference. It's made a difference in our lives. We still, actually, we're going to celebrate 40 years in another month, and we still love each other. I think we love each other more now than we ever did before. So these principles do work, and let's put them into practice. Please make sure that you have people helping you and you're helping them. I think you'll see a lot of growth that way. Love you, and have a great night. We'll see you on Sunday morning, and let's remember to pray for the people that we brought up earlier. It's critical for all those people. Have a good night.